Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our video with a story from the world of concrete mixer driver. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. You want me to drive a 34-ton mixer over a sand dune? Sign here, please. Concrete mixers are unwieldy, top-heavy, and spend a lot of time driving off-road with a shifting load. Consequently, we tend to pay a lot of attention to what we're driving on and where the customer wants us to go. What the customer wants and what we are physically able to do don't always meet. The job site I'm working on is down near the Salton Sea. For those unfamiliar with Southern California history and geography, the Salton Sea is what happens when a man from Flint, Michigan hires a Canadian shipwright to dig a 60-mile irrigation canal, then digs a couple of illegal bypass channels right before one of the worst floods in recorded history of the Colorado River. It has no outlet, and it currently is a fetid lake of salt, stink, and tilapia. The customer, who we'll call Polly, is building 3 greenhouses on sandy ground. The job mainly consists of chute-pouring post holes for the steel supports. It's slow work that isn't helped by being next to the bog of eternal stench in one of the hottest and most humid parts of the state. The lot is clearly blow sand. There's really fine stuff that gets carried by the wind. It's been graded smooth, but not compacted at all. Basically, the lot is a sand dune with pretensions of civilization, and even the balloon tires on the tractors are digging in. I'm not taking my pig of a truck anywhere near that sand, at least not until I wind up in a really foul mood. Luckily, the subcontractor's not stupid. He looks at the situation and decides to have me pour into the skip loader from the road. He knows we can't move my truck across that sand, so he's been having the loader ferry the concrete from my truck to the holes. It means that his crew has to shovel the concrete out by hand, but after the first couple loads, they're going to look like the chain gang from Cool Hand Luke, without the benefit of Joy Harmon. But since the owner didn't want to spring for a pump, it's the best option available. Polly doesn't show up until a couple days into the job. When I pull up with my load, he tells me that what we've been doing is taking too long. He's got a different plan, a better plan. He wants me to back out over the dirt to pour the holes directly, because clearly that thought never occurred to us. When I try to explain that the ground is just too soft, he points at the tire tracks through the sand and says, "The last truck made it fine." This is a lie. Not only that, it's an obvious lie. The last truck made it is one of the more common lies people tell drivers, right up there with, "We can refill your tank with the water truck." They're practically memes, similar to the jokes about inspectors being the enemy, just without the human or benign intent. It's the difference between Al Bundy and Ted Bundy. I know I'm being lied to, and what's worse, I'm being lied to incompetently. For starters, the tire tracks Polly's pointing at were clearly made by the loader, not a truck. Also, I was the last truck. The way the job's been going, they've had one truck come out and pour the load, then go back for the next one while the crew sets and aligns the posts in the holes. Polly doesn't know this because he got there while I was off getting the next load. In fact, since this is his first time out here since we started, he has no clue that I'm the only driver that's been on this job site since it started. This is one of those areas that doesn't bother with foppish fripperies, like street signs or addresses. On top of that, this job is on a flag lot, so it has a very narrow street facing. I was on the job the first day, and since after that I knew where it was, and he knew I wouldn't say no, my manager Bob asked me to do it on subsequent days, so he wouldn't have to deal with lost drivers. So Polly's a bad liar, and I'm now in a really foul mood. With my most obsequious smile, I say, "Oh well, in that case, of course. I just need you to sign the ticket before I can pull onto the property." On my way back to the cab, I call Bob to see what else we have going that day. There isn't much other work, so Bob asks what's going on. I explain the situation, and Bob just asks one question. Did he sign the ticket? When I say yes, he tells me to be careful and call him if we need a wrecker. If you ever order concrete yourself and the driver refuses to pour without you signing the ticket first, think long and hard about what you just asked him to do. The ticket includes a damage waiver and acknowledges receipt of the concrete. Some drivers may have you sign it as a matter of course, though I've never met one. Most guys I know don't even get the signatures after the job. For the most part, however, it should be viewed as a giant red flag that the driver thinks there's some kind of liability in play. It could be something as simple as backing up a curb, which could crack, or front yard, with ever so crushable irrigation pipes and septic tanks. It could also mean that you've really torqued off the driver, and he's about to nail you on standby time. You have a limited amount of time to unload before the accounting trolls start charging you $1 or $2 every minute. Your best bet is to ask them if there's something to be concerned about. Technically, you could refuse to sign, but by that point, it's Hobson's choice. And if there's nothing wrong with the load, you're paying for it either way. If we're busy, I would have slowly backed up until my truck started to bog down, then pulled forward and refused to go back any further. We aren't busy. When I bog down, I just pull forward and try again. Each time I get a little further back, and it's going very slow. Polly's getting upset. After a half dozen attempts, Polly starts waving me back furiously and shouts, "Step on it! Just get on top of it!" Apparently, Polly thinks I'm on a boat. But the customer's always right. I pull forward as far as I can, floor it in reverse, and right before I hit the sand, I flip the selector up and stick it into high range. A manual truck transmission is laid out in a standard H pattern, but each position covers 2 or 3 gears. There are selector switches to choose which set of gears you're using. For instance, on an 8-speed, low range is 1 to 4, high range is 5 to 8. While high range reverse is a usable gear, you'll almost never see a driver using it. Even the manufacturers recommend against attempting it. It's a fiddly gear that's easy to break if you hit it with too much power, and you rarely need to go anywhere near that fast in reverse. My truck leaps into that sand like a gazelle, huffing and wheezing across the veldt. It doesn't last long. I've barely made it a truck length before I have to go back down to low range. Not long after that, my wheels start slinging dirt, the tires sink in, and the truck starts bouncing from the effort. That's the signal to stop and check my work. Polly is of course not happy with this. My truck is nowhere near close enough. He looks at me and to my complete and utter lack of surprise asks, "What happened?" I tell him that I appear to be stuck. He asks if I can pull forward and try it again. I look at my tires. The truck is buried to the axles, and it weighs as much as 13 pickup trucks or 40 smart cars. Nothing short of divine intervention is moving that truck while it's still full. I smile and say, "I'll give it a shot." On the side of my stick is a little knob for something called deep reduction. You set that knob and put it into low, and that engine turns into the god of torque. For you gearheads out there, the ratio is somewhere around 27 to 1. It's practically impossible to stall the engine in that gear without running into an immovable object. Even then, you're just as likely to snap your axle or tear out the drivetrain. While the engine hums merrily along. And of course, if you're on soft, loose sand, it'll just kick a gloriously wicked rooster tail all over everything, or anyone, behind you. Polly's still spitting dirt when I get out to give him the bad news. Looks like we're going to have to keep using the loader like we were. Then once we've finished with that, we can use it to help pull my truck out of the dirt. In the end, we had the loader pulling on my tow hook and an excavator pushing on the Mansfield bar. Not only did it waste a half hour of the precious time he was trying to save, but he had to pay around $50 worth of standby. Of course, it could have been worse. If I'd truly been stuck, he would have been on the hook for the wrecker. And our next story. Hunting for trouble. My family used to live in a nice house in the countryside in Tuscany, Italy. We had an enormous backyard, at least a mile, but we never used all of it, and there was a lot of tall grass, snakes, and even a fox. One day, while me and my sister were playing in the backyard, we see 2 armed men with rifles walk onto our property and down the hill towards the end of our backyard. My mom rushes out and tells them that this is private property and they can't hunt there, but they ignore her and tell her to F off. We call the police, but usually it takes at least half an hour to an hour for them to get there. We lived really far away, and the cops are lazy there, so my mom now is super PO'd, and me and my sister clearly see it. My mom has had enough, and she hatches a plan. Right next to our house, there's a small plot of land where a lot of people park their cars. It's like a little sand park, and the hunters each have their own cars that they've parked there, so my mom takes a sledgehammer and just beats in one of their cars so bad that it just stops working altogether. All the while, my elderly neighbor is laughing his butt off while she's doing it. The hunters get back, and we can hear them arguing about which one gets to take the car. Eventually, one of them leaves and the other starts patrolling the street in front of our house with his weapon in hand, while my mom is nonchalantly mowing the yard as if nothing happened. They ask the neighbor if he saw something, and he pretends to not know what they're talking about. After a while, the other hunter leaves, then the police get there, and my mom files an official report. My old house is in Frassini in Italy. If you look up the house, it's the northern end, and you can see the house and the sand park behind it. My mom ended up building a fence and putting up a sign that said, Proprietà privata. Needless to say, we tell this story to our family and friends every year. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.